Hello, I'm Andy Coulson and welcome back to Crisis What Crisis, the podcast which aims to guide you towards a more resilient approach to life and whatever it might throw at you. We're joined today, I am absolutely delighted to say, by the novelist, former SAS soldier and campaigner Andy McNab. Crisis came very early in Andy's life, abandoned shortly after birth on the steps of Guy's Hospital in a Harrods carrier bag of all things. He was adopted and raised in Peckham. After what I think he would describe as a unsuccessful school career, Andy drifted into a life of petty crime before eventually ending up in juvenile detention, only leaving on the condition that he joined the military. It was to be the turning point of his life. 8 years after enlisting with the Royal Green Jackets, he undertook the notoriously gruelling SAS selection and succeeded. He then worked on both covert and overt operations, including counter-terrorism and drug operations in the Middle East and Far East, South and Central America and Northern Ireland. Most famously, in 1991, Andy commanded an 8-man squad designated Bravo 20, who were dropped behind enemy lines in Iraq on a mission to destroy Saddam's lines of communications. They were compromised, and in trying to escape to Syria, 3 of his team were killed, 1 escaped, and the remainder were captured and tortured. After 6 weeks, they were released. His best-selling book about those events has sold 6 million copies and has never been out of print. But Andy didn't stop there. He has published 52 further books in the years since, including an autobiography and a series of novels. His latest book, Shadow State, the first in a new series focused on the murky world of cybercrime, is out now. Now, alongside all this, Andy has also been awarded the CBE in recognition for his campaigning work around the crisis of illiteracy, helping young adults and those in prison improve their reading skills. So, Andy McNab, welcome to Crisis What Crisis, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being and having us, mate. Great stuff.
I'd say it's great to see you, but of course, for those who are watching on YouTube, they will have noticed that we can't see you. And that's for a very good reason, because since the release of Bravo 20 in 1993, you've very sensibly taken precautions against potential recrimination by doing your best to conceal your identity. So no pictures today, but I know the words, the story will more than make up for that. Andy, I suppose the fact that you still, all these years later, fear that someone could choose to make you a target begs a rather obvious question. How do you cope so far after those events with the fact that there is this threat? You know, there are practical things, concealing yourself as you are here, but how else does it restrict your life, can I ask?
Do you know, not as badly as you would think. It's just really being sensible. So, of course, as part of the, if you like, the business of publishing, I've got to sort of get out there and do the publicity on the book, all that sort of stuff. So it's just really being sensible and not showing my face. It's you get all the MPs and everybody get all the fruit who are going to come out and kill you and all that sort of stuff. But over the years, I've had some credible sort of threats and, get warnings from the police. So basically, it's not all cloak and dagger stuff. It's just being sensible, where the fact is not only sort of, my own sort of safety, but safety of the family.
We spoke with Bill Browder, the author of Red Notice. He faces a different threat, of course, from Vladimir Putin. He doesn't hide his face, but he does take sort of real measures to protect himself, particularly, his movements, right? There's no forewarning. He's very careful about his security. When we recorded the podcast, he got a sort of unexpected knock on the door while we were talking, and you could see his expression change. You could see him sort of tighten. Do you fear the knock on the door, Andy?
No, do you know, I don't. I think I've got sort of systems sort of in place. And in fact, the Ministry of Defence have been very sort of helpful in that anyway over the years. There's just systems in place that make that sort of really unlikely. So if you like, it's all the preparation more than anything. But it's because, both of us really are, high-value targets, HVTs, because it's not so much about the individual. What it's about is what it represents. So people who are in that sort of high profile sort of area. Means that so if they can get a hit, they can get an attack, they can get a death, it sort of heightens whatever their reasoning is. Whether again they're just sort of there's something mentally sort of deficient where they're just going out on a whim, or it is some sort of organised event.
Yeah. I mean, this came into the news. This issue came into the news quite quickly, quite recently. Obviously, with Prince Harry's book. And the argument there was this was a frankly a depending on who you read, a mistake. Let's put it that way, because it created a target by talking about the amount of people that you killed in combat, by describing them in the way that he did, that he put a sort of target on his back and on the back of others. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, but more at an individual level. I think that clearly, all through the book, the sort of the ghostwriter was given a bit sort of too much freedom on the way that he wrote. But I think that first of all young soldiers talk about, certainly within the environment, talk about it. If they've had a kill that day, that sort of stuff, and that's sort of natural stuff. I think going out. And talking about it in a book, not so much in the way that he thinks about it, just a chess player, and obviously politically that was everybody sort of jumping on board of that. But actually, what happens again? High value target. You got somebody who's already for the first time said that he's killed about 25 Taliban. So that just opens you up for attacks. So if you're looking at basically the general security of the royal family, it's 9 out of 10 times it's obviously to keep them away from the people who've got mental issues, and these are the new targets. But now what he's done is actually put a framework on a group of people that, again, he's a high value target. So if they could hit him or anything around him, they've achieved the aim. So you even look at Salman Rushdie, wasn't it, last year?
Yes.
So he's bouncing around for years, in effect, sort of feeling that he's free and he's doing his events, but actually it caught up with him. So he's basically just more as a personal target and sort of the people around him rather than in general. But I think he has.
Yeah. So you see something like Salman Rushdie. Does that make you? I mean, the day you saw that. What was your sort of internal reaction to it, if you like? Did that make you think, oh God, actually I can't relax?
20-30 years when the Satanic Verses come out. So
yes.
And again, he's had that sort of period where he's had a very tight security, and I'm sure there's been sort of threats bouncing up and down over the years. And then actually he's just opened himself up. There's a bit of a slack period. And bad timing, because there was somebody there who wanted to do something.
Yes.
So I think it's not being uber vigilant all the time, because you couldn't sustain that. But actually, it is being vigilant. And the original people that were jumping about with a fat while trying to get to him. Well, there's a newer generation now, and a lot of that newer generation really don't care if they get caught afterwards. So the threat's still there.
Can we talk a little bit about your reaction to crisis in the moment, though? That's the kind of that's the resilience that you've just described is a sort of over time process, but in the moment. For those, I suspect sort of about 24 people who haven't read Bravo 20, in 1991, behind the enemy lines mission to cut Saddam's lines of communications, your team is spotted by a young boy herding goats, no less. And after a pursuit, 3 of your colleagues are killed. You and others are incarcerated and tortured over a period of about 6 weeks, I think. Is the memory, Andy, of those days still vivid in your mind?
No, I don't dream about it. I don't think about it. Clearly, I think about it when we're talking about it, and I've got the imagery is still there if I want to have a look at it. But it's not avoiding it. It's done. I didn't want to, don't want it to happen again. But I got over it. and in fact, part of the system, rather than, I served another 3 years in a regiment. We call it the Special Air Service or the SAS and all that. It's not known as that. Within the environment, it's simply known as the regiment. I served another 3 years, and what I think helped me a lot was that you just got to get on. So it's like, that's done. You get sort of sorted out. There was some medical sort of treatment that had to be done, and then you're back straight on operations again.
In summary, Andy, if you don't mind, would you just explain, what happened to you?
Yeah. Well, it basically was in charge of an 8-man foot patrol that was sent to the northwest of Baghdad just before the ground war started. The air attacks and the Allied forces moving towards Kuwait to liberate it, trying to find a fibre optic cable that was passing the coordinates for the Scud missiles that were in the western deserts of Iraq at that time that were firing into Israel. So he went up there trying to find his cable. And then we were compromised, as you said, Andy, we were compromised by a young lad, a goat herd. And for us, the problem was that our biggest weapon was concealment. It's not the weapons we got, because we got like assault rifles and little grenade, 66 rocket launchers each, but it's concealment. So we're compromised. So what we had to do was try and get out of that hide area, because we're very closed up in the bottom of a watershed. Get out in the desert and try and make distance. That all went wrong, and we had to put in what was called our E&E plan, which was the escape and evasion, which is going to the American or the British embassy in Syria. Ironically, that was the closest country of safety for us.
Yeah.
So off we went. On the way, with a series of contacts, ran out ammunition. 3 were killed, 4 were captured, and only 1 made it eventually to the British embassy. So we individually were held in an interrogation centre in Baghdad, and by now the air war had started, so we're getting bombed every night. And they wanted us to say we were Israelis initially. So there was 3 of us in there. As a sort of discovered over the period. So we was all stripped of clothing, handcuffed, blindfolded. We were whipped, burnt, had some teeth pulled out by a guy who said he was a dentist from Guy's Hospital. But he's come back to Iraq because of the war. Is
that right? Did you point out to him that that's where you were? That was a significant location for you.
It was like, that was the weird thing. And obviously we're taking hits in the compound as well, so we might get sort of killed by our own sort of air power.
Right.
They wanted us to say that we were Israelis. Interestingly, some of the interrogators, the military interrogators, had been to Sandhurst, the UK's military academy, because obviously we backed them in their war against Iran for 10 years.
Yes.
So it's amazing, isn't it? So there was one of the interrogators. We had cover stories that we were medics from different regiments that have been amalgamated as part of search and rescue teams for downed pilots. And obviously we're all medical trained, so we can talk about that. We can talk about our old units, so it gave substance to the cover story. And it was one of the military interrogators said, he was in the Green Jackets. I went, yeah. He said, what battalion? I went, 2 RGJ, the 2nd battalion. And he went, he said, do you know Captain Vivian Smith? I went, yeah, I do. He was used to be in the same rifle company. He went, yeah, I was at Sandhurst with him.
Goodness.
That's how crazy it was.
Can I ask, Andy, at what stage in the process are you finding yourself having this, do you know, conversation? I mean, is this after he'd stubbed cigarettes out on your arms or pulled your teeth out? Or... No,
it was. There was 2 sets of interrogators. You had the secret police guys that were really going for it, and then you had the military guys that were really right. There'd be a few slaps and all that, but they weren't doing the whipping or the burning. And again, part of the process is trying to sort of have empathy with you and all that sort of stuff, which we. I must say that what we call the resistance to interrogation training that what we call prone to capture troops get United Kingdom Special Forces and air crews get this training really did help, actually. But yeah, you're just in this bizarre situation where 1 minute you're talking to them about sort of, you know, 2nd Battalion and Green Jackets, and the next time you go in, and again, you're always blindfolded and handcuffed and naked, and then you know that there's not going to be too much talking this time because it's the civilian guys, the secret police. But it going back to that sort of resilience thing, where your original question was that. You get to a point, and it's just not in this situation, or I get to a point, it's not just in the Bravo 20 situation, where you think, fuck it. You know, it's like, you know, you're there. There's not a lot you can do about it apart from try to get out.
What you're describing, Andy, is something that comes out in this podcast quite frequently. It's the sort of basic tenet of Stoicism, actually. It's just I don't know if you're a Stoic fan, but it's calculating in the most extreme circumstances. Here's what I've got control of. Here's what I do not have control of. I am going to put all the stuff that I don't have control of in the bin, and I'm going to focus only on what I have total control of. And that in this circumstance, when you're sat in a interrogation cell in Iraq, the only thing it seems that you had control of is your thoughts, is your mind. And so that's the bit I'm really interested in, because obviously your training, there's clearly we'll get into this perhaps a little bit later, there's clearly just something innate in you, right? But there's also this layer of training that you referenced a moment ago. And that training, as I understand it, includes kind of studying the testimony of others who have been tortured, right? Yes. So tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, well, we part of that sort of training, which is a continuous sort of process, and you do some of the physical part of it. We can't be naive about these things. All countries have their own sort of interrogation centres. All that sort of stuff exists, in the UK and everywhere else. So we go through the physical part of that training as well with the guys who. Do it for a living for the UK, so it's training for them, training for us, all that sort of stuff. But one of the interesting parts, where I didn't really think about it at the time, but obviously later on, it's sort of I could draw on it, was that we spent a week listening to people who had been prisoners held against the wall, whether they're political hostages, prisoners of war, and what they would explain was their situation, what they were thinking about, and then there was question answers, and the argument was that if there's just one sentence or one point somebody said during the course of this week that helps you if you're captured, great. And for me, it was an American Phantom pilot from the US Marine Corps. So he's on an aircraft carrier, and they fly 80 missions, and that's the end of their tour. So he's on his 77th mission, and the way he describes it, literally, he's on an aircraft carrier, so he's playing volleyball, drinking coffee, donuts, getting his Phantom, go off for a couple of hours, bomb something, and come back. So that's what he does. So he's on 77th mission, gets shot down, and had 6 years in solitary confinement. And every major bone in his body had been broken, just beatings, just getting beaten. And when he was talking to us, no hair, no teeth, and no muscle mass on his arse, because it literally was just beaten with bamboo, frayed bamboo, and all that muscle mass was just sort of beaten away. But he was still alive. And what he said, which really helped me, was that and again, probably going back to being a Stoic, was that he couldn't do anything physically to affect his situation, because if he resisted something with 2 guards, well, they'd just bring in 4. So he said the only thing they couldn't get was his mind. So he had fantasies of building a house. He's never built a house, but he built a house and he painted it, and he, all that sort of stuff. And actually, for me, that was it. The only thing they can't get hold of is your mind. And when you're captured, you still have a job to do anyway. It's called conduct under capture, and that's to give a window of opportunity for the headquarter element of the regiment to go, okay, we haven't heard anything from Bravo 20 for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. So what we have to assume is everybody's been captured and everybody is saying everything they know. So what they do from that threat assessment then is, a change or maybe cancel other operations. So you've got to give them time to do their threat assessments.
I see. You're literally, you're not just thinking that you're saving lives, basically.
Yeah, well,
in those early days, you're saving your colleagues' lives. Yeah.
Oh, totally. There was a couple of lads who were still out in the desert in D Squadron who were trying to physically find the Scuds, and two of those lads, I'm sort of godfather to the kids, and all that sort of stuff. So you're not naturally gonna be saying. And before you go out on jobs, you go into what's isolation. So you only need to know what you need to know. So you don't know about other people's jobs. You don't know the bigger picture. Again, because it's operational security. So they can say, what does Bravo 20 know? So this is what we've got to change. So if there are lads that have been caught and they get interrogated, they got to give us that window.
Astonishing, Andy. I mean, when you go back to the Phantom pilot, what we're talking about really there is an extreme example of the power of perspective. And that is something, actually. Your story is extreme, right? None of us are going to go through what you've gone through. But it does filter down to people who are suffering a different kind of crisis, right? The ability to think about others, to compare your situation with difficulties that other people have gone through, and to reach the conclusion always, which is a terrible cliche, but is an absolute truism in resilience, is it could be worse. Right?
It could be
worse. And the power of being able to say that to yourself is huge, isn't
it? Number one, it could be worse. And number two, you've just got to accept the truth. There's a crisis. It's here. It's happening.
Yeah.
Because culture is very good at putting the blame elsewhere, because no one's to blame. We've all got shoulders like Coca-Cola bottles, all the problems come off and they go elsewhere.
More and more, that is the case.
More and more,
yes.
And it's the more avoidance, the more it's going to get worse for you. So it's almost embracing the problem. Say, well, you accept it. It doesn't matter if you're to blame or, it's an event that's taken over, or it could be a family member that's dead. You just got to accept it.
Yes.
Accept it and then get on with it.
So the power of perspective, the integrity of the mind. What about in grief, Andy? I mean, how did you cope when you lost your colleagues? I mean, you've lost a number over the years, but in the Bravo 20 scenario, those are guys who literally stood next to you. You're running for the border together, and you lose three of them. I mean, how did that impact you?
It's not as within that sort of environment, within a military environment. It's not as emotional as people would expect. I think that obviously we're all watching films on TV, so they've always got to show the drama and the emotion of people dying. Of course, people are dead, and you know them, their families, their kids, all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that people forget is that nobody is making them be there. Everybody's a volunteer. And the argument is, if you don't like it, get out. So there's that, if you like, that baseline of that they're in the business of they've signed a non sort of conditional non-liability contract, because people do get injured and killed. So it's certainly on the, when people are getting killed on operations, there's really not too much time to think about that. It's when you get back, and then obviously if the bodies can be recovered and all, depending on the situation and the funerals with the families. And what happens is that the grief is taken over by making sure that the families are all right. So again, because they live there, the kids go to the same school, all that sort of stuff, and making sure that's all right. And we have bizarre sort of situations. It's called dead man auction. So what you do, you get all the guys' kit together, and there's a sort of loads of beer, loads of curry, everything's laid out, and everybody's bidding for a lot of it's a load of old crap. But what happens is that you're bidding outrageous amounts of money, I don't know, for a sweatshirt or something, because all that money goes to the families.
Goodness.
So what happens is, if you like, the practicalities of death take over more than the emotion.
So that's actually a sort of cultural, within the regiment, that is a sort of cultural sort of process,
Yes.
something that happens to, I mean, it's cold and it's also deeply emotional. It's
Totally.
not cold. It's practical, but it's also deeply emotional. And the idea that there is this gathering around someone's possessions, an auction held, people overpaying, so knowing that money will go to the widow and the children. I mean, that's an astonishing thing.
Yeah, no, I think I think it's a fantastic sort of system, and it's because there is a more, if you like, because we can always sort of mope around and it's a shame and like, but the fact is, he's dead.
I think we should just wrap up the story. Just explain how it is that you were released.
So what was done? There was a deal done between the International Red Cross and the Iraqis to bring Algerian medical staff over to deal with the civilian casualties. And it really was, it was about, the estimates, literally, easy 100,000 civilians were killed and injured, and well, you explain it in a minute as we're sort of bumping over bodies to get out of the Abu Ghraib. So there was a prisoner exchange because the Iraqis hadn't made the list and done what the International Red Cross require of people. So there was a prisoner release, which myself and two American Harrier pilots, US Marine Corps Harrier pilots, weren't part of. What happened was when the Red Cross get prisoners of war, there's another round of interrogations. Who do you know that is still there? Can you describe them? All that sort of stuff. And then what was happening, the Red Cross held back the Algerian medical staff to get there was about a dozen of us, to get a remaining dozen out of Abu Ghraib. And that's when, we're all put in a truck. And again, we didn't know this at the time, just realized there was one lot of prisoners that went and there was people that stayed. And literally as we're driving through, the truck's trying to avoid sort of dead bodies in the streets, because they still didn't have time to clear everything up, civilian bodies. So we put into an aircraft carrier, aircraft hangar, and which we thought, this is great. Near aircraft, there could be a real prison exchange. Just put up against the wall, and we had a mock execution, so it was all facing the wall. And the Iraqis started cocking weapons.
Jeez.
And again, it's going back to that. That stoic, if you like, mindset. It was like, I've got no control. So all you can do is all I'd done was rested my forehead against the wall, and we'll let them crack on, and nothing you can do.
But Andy, let's just pause there for a second. Do you remember what was the internal commentary?
Yeah, it was fuck it. It's like, got this, but fuck it. You're going to get, and that's it. Fuck it.
If it happens, it happens. Were you convinced that it was real, that it was going to happen, or?
Yeah. No, I thought we were going to be killed. I thought that again, because we're always handcuffed and blindfolded, facing the wall, and then you could hear, all the magazines being put. We know these sounds. Military people know those sounds. Magazines being put on. Weapons being cocked. And interestingly, I was next to this one of the jump jet pilots that I just mentioned, a guy called Joe Small, and obviously because I met him, sort of later on, and he was mumbling, and I thought he was like flapping a bit and all that, but what he was actually doing was praying, because he had just become a grandfather, but he's never seen the kid. So he said, what I was doing, afterwards, he said what I was doing was praying, like, to this grandchild he hasn't seen. And then you get different reactions down the line. Some people were shouting out, to like, profanities like fuck you, all that sort of stuff. A couple of people were begging. And what Joe Small done, so I was just leaning against the, forehead against the brickwork. And what Joe said, is just shouted at me like, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Because it's all going to actually, last thing I want to hear is you lot. Because he wanted to sort of pray. And it sort of affected some of them, not all of them. And then all the Iraqis started laughing. So you think, you know what I mean? You're like, thank fuck for that. It didn't happen. But, again, you've got no control.
Now, Andy, later in life, you went through a psychological screening process which resulted in a diagnosis of psychopathy.
Yeah.
A diagnosis that defined you as a psychopath, in other words.
Yeah.
But a good one.
Yeah.
You wrote a book about it, The Good Psychopath's Guide to Success. Hell of a title. Tell us about that diagnosis, please, Andy. The defining trait of a psychopath, of course, is a lack of empathy, an inability or difficulty to understand how other people are feeling. This news, I gather, was not a surprise to your wife or people who knew you well. But tell me about that diagnosis, please.
Well, basically, the Department of Experimental Psychology was doing some research on where what we call functioning psychopaths are in society, because there's a theory that functioning psychopaths actually sort of help society rather than being like the Ted Bundy, of real life, or the the Dexter Morgan of sort of TV. And their research was showing they would be where you would expect. They were in law, they were in politics, finance, medical profession, particularly neurosurgery, and the military. I said, "Do you want to do these experiments?" I went, "Yeah, okay." And you get all rigged up with all the sensors, 64 sensors that go on a skull cap. You're all gelled up, and you've got different sensors over the body. And there's certain parts of a body that can't bluff it. You can't bluff that you're not being affected in some other way. So you get sat into this chair, almost like a dentist chair. You're all strapped in with all this kit on, and you're subjected to all these different, visual and audio stimuli. And what happened was that you got all the guys, it was a bit like a film scene. They all got white coats on. It's all sort of quite strange with all the machines. And what happened? So after it, they were sitting there and they was undoing me and all that. And basically, the results were quite unique in a way that it flatlined, and they become quite sort of famous in academia, these results. Because what happens, I had to go back and redo it with a different compliance group. So you got the scientists who were doing it.
They doubted the clarity of the result.
They doubt the data. So you have the scientists, and then you have a compliance group that are watching it. So what they've done, they've redone it with a different compliance group, and it was the same reading. So
the reading was that you are undeniably a psychopath. How do they define the good versus the bad psychopath? Yeah. Is it purely based on your actions, or is there also a path that they can follow from a data perspective?
There is. There's both. There's actually reactions from, certainly, if you like, the verbal sort of therapy type sessions that you do before, and the data that they're collecting from the clinical trials, because obviously they can see the brain, they can see the bits of the brain that are lighting up. Again, the stuff that you can't sort of cheat and bluff through a verbal sort of system, and you're seeing the neurons moving, making pathways in different parts of the brain as opposed to where they should go, because there's a small almond-shaped, about the same size as an almond as well, part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala gives you fight and flight, obviously in the old part of the brain, fight and flight, empathy, all those sort of things that we sort of take for granted in everyday sort of life. So what happens, the amygdala didn't work.
Andy, I listened to a Desert Island Disc interview you gave many years ago to Sue Lawley. In it, she asked you if you could kill for money. You said, almost without hesitation, that you could, that
Yes.
You were perfectly happy with your now very successful life, a life that doesn't require you to kill anyone, but that if that changed, if that life went wrong, that, yes, you could kill someone. The difficult bit, you told her, would not be the killing, it would be the getting away with it.
Get away with it, yeah.
I mean, is that really how you felt? Is that really how you feel?
Yeah, and still now, I think it's very sort of clear cut. I think it's like, and I've got the ability to kill people and not sort of worry about it too much, so that's fine. I think that one of the problems with psychopathy is that life well, it's a problem within society. It's not for people, register high on the spectrum, but it's almost not as flippant as a game, but everything's like a game. It's like, well, let's give it a go. So if like there was an opportunity, you say, okay, well, the thing again, we're all sort of being grown up on watching TV on the way that these things work. It's really, really clear cut. If the technical term, you're given your principal, the guy you're going to kill, how much is it worth to the guy who's going to pay you? If it's worth $1 billion, say, well, you want 10% of that. So it's what's it worth to him? So that's all the pre-work you've got to do. Then you've got to do the job, and most importantly, of course, is get away with it. But it's all part of the. And again, it's the flippant term, and I'll try and think of a decent term for it, but it's all part of the game.
You're being brutally honest about this. The taking of another life outside of a military context, right? And let's be clear, when you're with your squad in Iraq, you are doing a job on behalf of a government, on behalf of a nation, right? You are representing others. In a civilian context, or in a mercenary context, or in a contract killing context, that is purely about money. It is without morality, and you can say that about yourself, presumably because of your psychopathy, that you do not have the necessary empathy, or you do not have an empathetic barrier that stops you considering the moral impact of taking another life.
No, the amygdala doesn't work, and it's an interesting sort of thing where it's not in a cold-hearted way of kill. It's not about that. Basically, it's you're looking at it and go, well, first of all, and again, it's you've got to be really basic about it. Is it interesting enough? Are they paying me enough? Does it appeal enough for me? If all those answers sort of work, even whether we're looking at the situation now of being paid to kill somebody, or actually being asked to do anything to do with publishing or film or whatever it is, it's the same sort of free criteria.
It's the same process for you. But you're a father. But Andy, you're a father. In this imaginary scenario, that the person that you might be being paid to kill will have a family, will have children. We talked in a very emotional way about the dead man's auction, very sort of visceral description of that, where you could recognise the emotional. It's fundamentally a practical exercise in helping everyone move on, but it is also a deeply emotional moment. You recognise the emotion there, but you're saying you really are saying that you would not, if the circumstances of your life led you there, that emotional calculation just simply would not exist for you.
No, it wouldn't. I didn't think that if you're looking at, you're talking about people from the regiment being killed. Just on an interesting note is that within my troop, 7 Troop, more people were killed once they left, committing suicide due to whether it's PTSD. They're not actually killed on jobs, but the if you like the way that they died doesn't matter. It's because just as we were talking about, my family or the military family. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of us. It's part of the tribe. So it becomes all very tribal. So if you've got, again, it's sort of bizarre circumstance where you get offered one of these jobs, well, they're not part of the tribe. So why do I care?
So the tribal instinct can affect your emotional radar.
Yeah, they're one of us. They're one of us.
Andy, we talked about the diagnosis now in some depth. Are you a believer in therapy?
No.
One imagines that it doesn't really work for you. Is that right?
No, it doesn't. I think from the point of therapy to all those affirmations of dolphins jumping out the sea, you change your wife and all life and all that sort of stuff. I think as far as I'm concerned, the only way to do it is to do it yourself and just get on with it. And I think we're so sort of certainly in the West, we're so sort of caught up in the niceties of life that we're worried about what other people think, and we're worried about within sort of culture in general. If we do something, it might not be, what needs to be done and frowned upon.
You think this sort of you think this sort of journey of self-analysis that the world seems to be on, some of it on the softer side, some of it on the more practical. Is dangerous, or is it just a waste of time?
No, I don't think it's dangerous. But I don't believe that it works for people. People are too. We've got so much entitlement. Self-entitlement. And that comes from that whole entitlement movement in the 70s of everyone's special, everyone's this, everyone's that.
That's for sure.
Actually, we're not. We're really not. So we're not really special. 6 billion of us out here, and we're running around trying to sort ourselves out. So the fact of all of a sudden that we feel that we're missing out on something because we're entitled to whatever it may be without doing the work to get it.
Andy, we've had a number of guests on the pod who were adopted. They all went on to succeed, but only after experiencing, crisis at one stage or another in their adult lives. Do you think that difficult beginning impacted or sort of accelerated the psychopathy and your innate ability to deal with the difficult stuff, or were you just built that way? It's the classic kind of, nature nurture question, I suppose.
You know what? I think I was always like it. There's horrendous stories of being in care and all that sort of stuff. And then even if there isn't, sexual and physical abuse, all that sort of stuff, there's still the whole thing of not knowing your mother, and it does affect people. I liked it. I thought it was all right. Everything that was happening, and I was adopted by the cleaner. My mum, who became my mum, was a cleaner in the home, and she used to. Yeah, it wouldn't happen now, but I used to take kids home for the weekend, so I'll take him home or something.
Yeah,
so I had,
yeah. My gran used to do exactly that.
Yeah. I had another kid. There was another kid who was older than me, who was a physically abused kid. He was burnt with an iron and things by his natural parents, but he would go home for the weekends with the cleaner, and so it was just a natural progression because I thought that's what happened. So I went off, and then me and this older lad would then be there, and then. Again, no idea what was going on. They said, "Oh, well, you live here all the time now." And I went, "Okay," because this elder lad did as well, and we were both adopted. But what he said, "Look, when the law was just changing. Actually, for him it would be 15, for me it'd be 16." He said, "When you're 16, you're out, no matter what." You know what I mean? So it's like a waiting room. And it's 15. He was off. So in my head, always when I'm 16, I'm off anyway. So but not in a horrible way. I'm getting out of it. It's like,
but sorry, was that the adopted family had made clear to you that when you were 16, the kind of arrangement would come to an end, or the system was telling you that that's what would happen?
Would come to an end. Yeah. And my brother went, "Oh, that's when it all ends."
Right.
Because that's how he thought. So I thought, okay, that's what happens. So always. And again, no, in a horrible way. I want to run away from this horrible place. It was like, well, I'm 16. That's the end. And what and again, in sort of later life thinking about it, I also had a great time when I was there because I was just left to get on with it.
Yeah.
So it was.
So answer the nature nurture, Andy. Give me your answer. It's nature.
Nature.
Yeah? You don't think that environment affected you one way or t'other?
No, I think what it done, the freedom gave me to actually mature, if you like, the nature, because it was so much time, and again that whole thing of why do I need to go to school?
Yeah.
I don't.
Which is as he explained, is sort of the natural part of the Andy McNab operating system. You've never tried to trace your parents. You're a storyteller. But you don't want to fill in the blanks in your own story.
I don't. It occurs to me. And again, it comes from my elder brother, adopted brother. So years later, he got married and he was having his first child, and it's the normal thing, hereditary diseases and all that sort of stuff, and he hasn't got a clue. So he then started to see if he could find his mother, and bizarrely, it didn't really upset our mum, it upset our dad. And so And then all of a sudden he went, well, I won't bother. Why, it doesn't really bother. The fact is, like, if I've got a hereditary disease, I'll soon find out one way or another, So then that sort of went on the back burner for him. And then I thought, again, it was the elder brother who sort of was the, if you like, consistency as I was growing up. I thought, right, well, no point whatsoever. So when I had my own child, it was, again, hereditary diseases, all that sort of stuff. I thought, well, I haven't got a clue. And the way, again, that I was thinking about it was the fact is that, well, all that stuff doesn't matter because I can't change anything. What, all I can do is change today, make today happen.
Andy, let's talk about the literacy work, if we can, for a second. You've done so much to improve the reading abilities of so many. We touched on your school days earlier, but when you joined the army, I understand you yourself had a reading age of 11 or so.
Yeah.
You've had a particular focus on literacy in prisons. Tell me about why that matters to you, because you're not a man without emotion. Let's be clear about that. Only given the conversation that we've had, and this is a very clear, very kind of impressive demonstration of your ability to see well beyond yourself and into the needs and problems of others.
Yeah, well, it all came. It all sort of happened through a group called the Reading Agency. So. Initially, I was going into the military training establishments because for the infantry, still now, the same as me, it was most are what we call now the education parlance, key stage 2, numeracy and literacy between a 9 and 11-year-old. So it's first started going in there, going, look, basically, like, lads, now's the time. They're going to educate you, use it, abuse it, get as much as you can out of them because it's going to help you now and help you in the future. And then it moved into the prisons. Biggest occupational group in prison is ex-military, but it's not, as people would think, it's not PTSD and all that. It's basically young lads. They've done between 4.5 and 6 years. They come out, it's drink and fight and violence. So going into the prisons, there's a credibility thing of being within what was the Borstal system at that time, because it was quite a strict regime. So there's a bit of, credibility there because, like, urban legend has taken over the reality of the Borstal system, all that sort of stuff. And obviously Special Air Service. So go in, talk about how my education started, how it helped when I was in the Special Air Service, all that sort of stuff, and now writing, and it ended with that you ain't got that much to do at the moment, lads. Get an education, start reading, get an education, because what we want you lot out of prison and earning money, looking after your family and paying tax. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Because there's so many. Again, you go into Pentonville. The governor of Pentonville said, "Well, it's roughly 78% of those lads will be back within 2 years." Exactly. So
yeah, when I was in prison, the toe by toe program was widely used and appreciated. I don't know if you know that program.
No, I don't know that one. No,
it was very, very, and it's a mentoring thing. So you sit with another prisoner who can't read, and you kind of you read with them. It's a great way to spend half a day, I can tell you. I was shocked by the amount of prisoners who are unable to read at all, and by the number who got. It seems that they kind of get to the age of, or they'd got to the age of about 10 or 11 actually with their reading age, and then stopped, which presumably, is the moment at which. They become interesting to the people who are dragging them into gangs or steering them off down in another path of their life. So it's you can almost see, in a very kind of obvious way, the sort of path in their life heading off in a different direction.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that obviously, particularly sort of younger men in adult prisons and certainly in youth offender institutions, there's still a bit of bravado. It's like, but the older, certainly particularly with people with families, all of a sudden you can see it click, and you can see it. Do you know what? Because the argument is, look, doesn't matter what you read, book, poster, magazine, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Every time you read, you get a bit of knowledge and you get a bit of power. Yeah. And the more power you get, you can do what you want to do as opposed to anybody else telling you. So it's not a magic wand. You've got to get out there and compete with everyone else, and you're starting from the bottom anyway because you're coming out as an ex-felon.
Yeah.
But you've got to get out there and compete, because otherwise you're back here. And it's the older ones, sort of late 20s onwards, who sort of get it. And at one stage, I think we had about 38,000 people on the program, and I'm sure that all of them weren't sort of a success once they got out, but at least it got a momentum.
Amazing success, and congratulations. And quite rightly, your CBE is for those services. Andy, a quick question on the crisis that our armed services appear to be facing. I saw a graphic this week which charted, I think it was on Sky, which charted the reversal in government defence spending versus health from the mid-50s. From just over, I think, 7% to just over 2% for defence, and it's an exact mirror for health. Quite rightly, health spending obviously has gone up, but it's the worrying decline in defence spending. And alongside this, I saw an American general warning that the British Army is no longer a top-tier level or a top-tier fighting force. Are you worried about the future of the Army? I mean, are you worried about the future of the SAS?
Yeah, constantly. I think that if you're looking at the Army in general, obviously there's this reduction in costs when, like everything else, like every other sort of pillar of society, the costs are going up. But I think that because we've had so many reviews and so many certainly looking at what you call the future conduct of conflict, of almost like the post 9/11 wars, it'd be Iraq and Afghanistan. And now we're changing back to when it was 7%, when we was involved in the Cold War. So we're going back to what we call sort of the real estate conflicts, what's happening in...
as we're seeing in Ukraine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So we're going back to that Cold War where it's all about big armies, lots of armour, and keep on rolling forward, or being in defence in depth and waiting for the enemy to come. So we in that way, we wouldn't be able to sustain a European conflict, which we're part of. We're legally sort of bound to join in that conflict. We wouldn't be able to sustain the same sort of effectiveness as we would have done even in the 90s, because there's been so much reduction. And then looking at these future conduct of conflict and, these small, what we call force projection, where you'd go off to Iraq or you go off to Afghanistan or you go to Africa or wherever it is. Now we're back to the if you like, traditional real estate type of war, that you've got to take land or you've got to defend it, and we're not capable of doing that.
So you're hopeful. You're hopeful, in fact, then that a conflict like Ukraine might put the brakes on this.
I think it has.
Yeah.
Interestingly, on a good note about the military, though, is if we're looking at our leadership within the military, it's never been better, because the two post 9/11 conflicts got rid of, if you like, the B team, because it was constant operations. You needed people that could actually command troops in the field, and those people now have filtered into the leadership of the
right.
So we got 18 now in command, and Sandhurst, where we think that everybody's sort of Colonel Blimp, all from Oxford and Cambridge. It's not. It's just over 50% now of all cadets come from state schools. They come from comprehensive schools. So there is this change that's going. Yeah. But actually, we're getting a better quality people. But what we need now is the kit and certainly the government sort of
interesting. And in politics, of course, there's some quite interesting veterans now in and around politics. Yes. Our veterans minister himself, of course, Johnny Mercer, who was a guest on this podcast. Andy, fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask you for your 3 crisis cures. These are 3 things that you've lent on. Something tells me that these are going to be somewhat practical in nature, which is fantastic, because that's exactly what we want. So give us, please, your 3 crisis cures.
Number 1, first of all, don't start flapping. Just accept what's going on. There is a crisis. It's here. It's happening. And again, it doesn't matter if you're at the blame. It really doesn't matter. The fact is, it's here. So accept the truth, and basically get on with it. So the second one is that once you've accepted the truth, You've got to get on, take an action. And everybody's so sort of consumed with the big problem that the only way to, solving the big problem is not going to do that. You've got to rectify it slowly to get out of the crisis. You're taking, sort of take responsibility for it. You've got to go, okay, how am I going to deal with this? So let's have a look at maybe an example. Your friend owes you money. He knows it, but, nobody's really talking about it. You then start going, oh, have they forgotten? Should I call them, ask for the cash back? What happens if they say no? Will it affect the friendship? I just don't want that confrontation, even knowing that you are in the right. So, but that first step, if you like, you're nibbling away at the problem, is you make that call.
Confront it.
Make that call.
So accept it, confront it. Start with the small solutions. What's the third step for you?
And accept that the world isn't that perfect. You may not come out of that crisis completely clean, or in that case, or the CAC. Maybe the relationship isn't 100% back to where it was, and maybe you only get 70% of the money back. But so what? Well, first of all, is you really that good a mate anyway that you've had to do this and only get 70% back. But nothing is perfect, And the fact is that once that crisis is sorted out at whatever percentage it is, first of all, give it 2 months down the line, it's all history and people have forgotten about it, because there's always the next crisis coming up. So, it's again, we said in the beginning, that's why we're successful as a species, because we can adapt and overcome. But the thing is, you just got to get on with it and try and get some resolution, because the next one's coming down the road and you don't want it all compound on top of each other.
Superb. Andy McNab, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Good luck with the new book, sir, Shadow State, which is available now. Go and buy it. But thank you for your insights. It's a fascinating conversation about crisis. Thank you, Andy.
Pleasure, Andy. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please do give us a rating and a review. It really helps. And if you hit subscribe wherever you download your podcast from, you'll find loads more useful crisis conversations. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and you can watch the full episodes on YouTube. Just search for Crisis What Crisis Podcast. You can also find full transcripts of this and every episode on our website, crisiswhatcrisis.com. Thanks again for joining us.